Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be continuing our underrated and underappreciated movie series. We've already done 2 parts on this one a number of months ago, but since doing those, I've come up with some others I'd like to share. So I got 5 more picks that are behind me that I'm going to share, some underrated and underappreciated movies. Welcome once again, my name's Austin and this channel is all about digging deeper and going further to better understand faith and film and everything that's in between. If that sounds exciting to you, make sure you click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on any future content. As I mentioned already a few months ago, I did a 2-parter where we talked about 10 underrated and underappreciated movies for me, and since making those videos, I've come up with 5 more movies that I consider to be underrated and or underappreciated. So without further ado, let's get started with my picks behind me. First, over my right shoulder, we have 10 Cloverfield Lane. Now honestly, I probably could have put either of the Cloverfield movies on this list, but I personally have a bit of a softer spot for 10 Cloverfield Lane. I absolutely love, I believe it's Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance in this movie, as well as John Goodman. That is one of my favorite John Goodman performances in this movie. I adore it, and I love the confined nature of this film and how we're kind of following along with the main protagonist trying to figure out what is actually happening. We know it takes place in the Cloverfield universe, so is it actually what's going on outside, or is this guy absolutely crazy? I love the mysteries of this movie. I enjoy it every time I check it out. It's one of my favorite ones to introduce people to who especially aren't necessarily into kind of the horror thriller genre, because I think of it as a bit of a lighter thriller or horror movie, so definitely one that I enjoy recommending to people. Again, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a really great one. Also over my right shoulder, we have the movie Chronicle. This is one of the coolest movies made, in my opinion. It's a really cool, really interesting look at what would real people do with superpowers. Now, I feel like this movie was a bit ahead of its time, at least when it comes to these superhero movies that were coming out around the time of its release, because nowadays we have Invincible, we have The Boys, we have other shows like that that are kind of like, what if heroes aren't exactly how we think they are, or a bit more of a grounded, authentic look at that. This movie did that years ago, and I love it for it. It was also done in the found footage style, so it makes it much more kind of grounded in its nature and believable, I think, in its storytelling. And I love following the 3 teenage boys of what would they do with superpowers. Each of them has a different background, so when they get the powers of telekinesis that they get, they each kind of delve down their own path. And it's a fascinating character study, I think, and it has a really, really interesting story. Now, starting over my left shoulder, we have the movie Dread. This is a really solid action movie that I wish had gotten a sequel. I'm not someone who grew up watching or have seen, even at this point, the original Dread movie that came out back in the 80s with Sylvester Stallone, but this one is definitely a hidden gem. It's an excellent action thriller. It's pretty much non-stop action all throughout the movie, and has a really interesting story too, just enough that you need to hook you and keep you watching through the end. I kind of, in some ways, consider it similar to The Raid, which I believe is a Portuguese action movie. It's a very popular one. There's The Raid and The Raid 2. I kind of consider this the American version of The Raid. It has somewhat overlapping similar styles, but this one is much more done in like a sci-fi, cyberpunk environment. It's really cool, tons of great action. Carl Urban gives some of the best lower half of the face acting I've seen, and he is a very underappreciated actor in my opinion. Great action movie. If you're into action films and you've not seen this one, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice. Next pick, also over my left shoulder here, we have Need for Speed. This is one that I didn't grow up playing these games too much, but I was a pretty big Aaron Paul fan when this movie came out, and I enjoy racing movies quite a bit. So this one was right on my alley, kind of based off of a video game. We've got Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad in it, and they did really cool practical stuff with the racing in this movie too. I think it's got really cool Rami Malek performance and just tons of fun. There's nothing great or spectacular about this one, but it's definitely underrated. I really appreciate the fact that they took the effort to do all of the action practically and do it as authentically as possible to kind of real street racing. So it's really neat stuff. So if this is one you slept on when it came out and just never kind of got around to, give it a chance. I think it's pretty good. It's a lot of fun and definitely one of my picks for an underrated movie. My last pick for this video is going to be a last one over my left shoulder, Tomb Raider. This is the 2018 reboot. And the reason this one is on this list is because I am a huge fan of the video game that this movie adaptation is based off of. And this is one of those movies that I consider a solid video game adaptation. They are working on a sequel to this one, which I'm very excited about, but the video game it's based off of is one that I would probably consider one of my favorite video games. I absolutely loved it. I've played through the game 2 or 3 times now, and it gets a great story, really grounded, gritty take on the Lara Croft Tomb Raider. I only watched the old Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movies probably once, and they just never really connected with me as much. But this one, based on my love for the video game, I really like Alicia Vikander's performance, as well as I believe Donnie Yen is in this one too. They give some really cool performances. It's got a fun story. It follows along with the video game enough, diverges in a couple of areas just as much as it needs to, really, but it's a really solid video game adaptation in my opinion. So if again, this is one you slept on, give it a chance. I really enjoy this one and I have a lot of fun with it. So those are 5 more of my picks for underrated and or underappreciated movies. They are all of these definitely worth checking out in my opinion, and ones I would recommend to people. So if you have any other underrated or underappreciated movies you would like to recommend to people, share those in the comments down below. As again, a reminder, this is part 3 and I'm kind of become an ongoing series now of underrated movies that I would like to recommend to people. So I'm already kind of working on a list for the next part in this series. So that'll probably be coming out in a couple of months or so as I work through different movies that I've seen and enjoy. So thank you for checking out this video. If you want to check out other parts and you missed the ones from a couple of months ago, go back on my channel a couple of months. You can see part 1 and part 2 with 10 more movies that I would recommend. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I will see you in the next one.